Welcome to the Equestrian Mindset Academy podcast, an equestrian performance podcast where we will deep dive into the mindset and management challenges of ourselves and of our peers. Our discussions will allow you to learn from experts, encourage you to set audacious goals, overcome challenges, and develop actionable plans. Ready? Let's do this. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Equestrian Mindset Academy podcast. So it's still raining here. There's a massive storm coming overnight. I hope that it's going to miss you, but apparently it's going to be rain and hail and nearly 60 millimeters for us, and I'm fully expecting my veranda to flood, and hopefully it doesn't flood into my house, but we'll wait and see. You may have noticed that I was actually offline last week and that there wasn't a podcast, and truthfully, it's just because I slightly overcommitted myself last week, and I want to tell you why. So my first degree was a science degree, and one of my first loves was climate change and climate science, climate research, and really anything to do with the environment, although I do love animals and animal research as well. But I saw this Instagram post a couple of weeks ago, and it was for a company that I had followed a while back, and they were doing this amazing Women in STEM voyage to Antarctica, and it's something that I always wanted to do. See the animals, the wildlife, the landscape, and learn about the issues facing, in particular, Antarctica, or that we can see that climate and climate issues are pronounced in Antarctica. So I saw this Instagram post. I had maybe a couple of days where I thought, no, don't worry, just let it go, like try and shut down that urge, and I couldn't do it. So I decided life is short, and you get to step outside of your lane, and you get to do something just because you have a desire to do it for no other reason. So last week I decided to sign up to go on a voyage on a ship to Antarctica to learn about climate science, climate research in Antarctica in the 2024 to 2025 season. And it sounds absolutely crazy, but I cannot wait. And what I would say is I nearly held myself back because my brain was doing this interesting thing to me where it tends to overload me with reasons why not. My teams at work have previously called me Captain No, and it's because I tend to default to no until I've had a really good chance to think an idea through. So my brain overloads me with reasons why not, and it might be similar for you. So in this case, it was like, well, I can't go to Antarctica. I'll be away from home for like 2 months, 3 months. Who will look after the horses, right? Who will look after the dogs? Will my partner be okay by himself? And then it goes to things like, yeah, but what if I get seasick? Like I've been on a cruise ship once. It was like 12 years ago. I was young. It was a party boat and it was going around the very smooth waters of the South Pacific. And I can just tell you right now, based on the videos that I've seen of this voyage to Antarctica, the passage from Argentina down to Antarctica is not smooth. Like these icebreakers are bouncing up and down in this passage, the Drake Passage. If anyone wants to Google it or YouTube it, it's called the Drake Passage. So my brain was like, well, you might get seasick, so don't bother going. And how convenient of my brain to come up with all these reasons why I absolutely shouldn't follow my desire or my urge or my dream in that moment. And it's so good at keeping me safe. And what I decided was, let me make that a problem for future Lauren. So how about I just do one thing at a time? And my thing that I needed to do last week was actually get the application in and actually update my resume and apply. Next, I may or may not have to go through an interview process, and I'll deal with that when it comes. And then how about I wait until just before I get on the ship, when I talk to my doctor and get seasick tablets, to care or worry at all about getting seasick. And it sounds so simple, but can we refocus our minds onto just the next hour, just the next 5 minutes, or just the next task that I have to do? And just let the future be future Lauren or your future self problem, right? Just let what will be. And our brains are so bad at doing this because they want to keep us safe, but it means that we're not in the present moment. We don't follow our urges or our desires, and we shut ourselves down. So this is just your reminder. It's a little bit of an apology for me not putting a podcast out last week. And it's a reminder that you can literally do what you want to do. Your brain will give you 1,000 excuses. And I bet just when I said that, you were like, oh, that's not true. But I guarantee you can do what you want to do. All it takes is one step, one thing at a time, and just remaining in the present moment and saving future problems for your future self. So, with that, I want to do today's topic as like a last follow-up from Ben's podcast. And I promise you next week we'll have another guest on, but we really couldn't go past this connection from Ben's talk with us. So in the episode with Ben, we were talking about how it's really difficult in particular to say no to someone when they're standing right in front of you. And even more so if you are a people pleaser, or I think Ben called it an obliger in the episode, but I'm going to call it a people pleaser. These types, these people pleasers, are super likely to collapse under the pressure and say yes, even if they didn't want to. But before we even get to the stage of saying no to someone's face, it's really important that you understand whether or not you are a people pleaser, that you understand the risks of being a people pleaser, and at the end, we'll talk through some really small starting steps that you can use to take back some of your time and some of your energy if you are in this people pleasing mode. So first, what is a people pleaser? The term people pleaser refers to a person who has a strong urge to please others, even if at their own expense. You have a strong urge to please others, even if it's at your own expense. And it means that you may feel that your own wants and needs don't matter, or you might end up changing your personality around other people. And I just want to have a quick disclaimer here. People pleaser is not a medical diagnosis as such, but that being said, there is a version of people pleasing that can lead to the behavior impacting your work, impacting your relationships, or your view of yourself really significantly. And in that case, if that's the case for you, I always recommend that you seek further help. Setting that aside, if you are a people pleaser, the desire to people please can manifest in many ways. And here's some of them. So, like we talked about, you might find it really hard to say no to requests, or you might regularly take on extra work, even if you don't think you have the time or you know you don't have the time. So I see this all the time. Let's say your friend is going traveling for a month and she's asked you to take care of her horses while she's away, and you say yes, which means now you're juggling yourself, your work, your children, your partner, your other pets, your hobbies, your commitments, your horses, and having to make additional time for her horses to be fed, rugged, farriered, vetted, whatever, for an entire month. Can you even imagine how busy you've made yourself in doing that? And even knowing, you might have known ahead of time how busy that was going to make you, and you still took on the work. Another way people pleasing might manifest is that you often overcommit to plans or responsibilities or projects. So I had a client the other day who was feeling really stressed, and they had done this thing where they had been out at a show jumping weekend and they had rushed back from the competition because they had to go on a trail ride with some friends that they were invited on. So number one, can you imagine how exhausted that horse was? And number two, my client, they were feeling thoroughly overcommitted and they were stressed at both events. So they were stressed at the show jumping competition, hoping that the competition was going to run on time so that they could leave on time, so that they could get to the trail ride, so that they could go out with their friends. So stressed at show jumping and stressed on the trail because they were a bit worried about their horse having been out all day and then having to go on a few kilometers of a ride. Why do we do this to ourselves? Another way people pleasing manifests is that you might avoid advocating for your own needs, saying that you're fine when you're actually not. You might avoid disagreeing with people, or you might avoid voicing your honest opinion. Or you might go along with things that you're not happy about just to avoid creating friction. If you have people-pleasing tendencies, you might also feel pressure to be friendly or nice all the time. You might feel anxious about creating unease or standing up for yourself. You might be stressed due to the commitments you've taken on. You might be frustrated that you've never got time for yourself, or that your own wants and your own needs don't matter in comparison to everyone else. Or you might feel that people take advantage of you. And I know I used some equestrian examples through that list, but I think you'll also be able to clearly see that there are times in your broader life as well where you're also people pleasing. So whether that's at work or with your partner, your family, groups of friends, wherever, just keep in mind that if you see it in one area of your life, it's probably happening in other areas. And the good news is most of us aren't born as people pleasers. But unfortunately, we start people pleasing as either a strategy to cope with the circumstances around us, or we were molded into people pleasing habits by the culture around us. So if you're using it as a strategy to cope with circumstances, it might be conflict avoidance or because of trauma. I know for me, when I was thinking about this, I grew up in a big dressage barn, and there was a really difficult person at that barn. They were really opinionated, they were aggressive, they felt no shame in yelling at other people around them, and they always demanded and got their way. And that certainly meant that I kind of inherently adopted this strategy where I just agree with everything they said in the hope that I was not their next target of their next explosion. If people pleasing for you is more of a personality trait, it might be born out of anxiety or low self-esteem or insecurity or perfectionism. Or you might be molded into people pleasing, so from the culture or being socialized around people who were also people pleasers themselves. Or just being raised in modern day, we tend to hear things like think of others before we think of ourselves. Give your friends a turn first. If you're a mother, you probably always give your children the biggest slice of cake. Or you give them the first ride on your horse. Or you help them with their horses before you ever get a chance to get on your own horse. Or you find yourself jumping in and helping others to solve their problems. Whatever. So we're either using it as a strategy to cope with circumstances, it's a personality trait, or we were molded into it. However you got to people pleasing, that messaging has led us to this point where it's going to take a toll on you. And here's how it takes that toll. You can be stressed. So when you feel like you don't have the resources to cope with something, or you're frequently overbooked, you have a high workload, a long to-do list, anything like that can result in the stressed feeling. You might be behaving in an inauthentic way or ignoring your actual wants and needs, and that can also make you stressed or anxious. People pleasing might make you tired. If you're taking on too much or you're putting on a more cheerful persona around others, that can actually also be mentally or physically tiring. Now, people pleasing can also lead to kind of a self-neglect. If you have little time or energy for yourself, you may neglect aspects of your own self-care. This can be anything, right? It's different for every single person, but it could be personal hygiene, appearance, mental or physical health, your career, your horse riding time, your competition career with your horse. It may even mean that you have less energy to help others in the long run. Another risk of people pleasing is that you could become resentful. So if you feel like you have no choice but to please others, you may grow to resent it and you may be angry or frustrated about it. And this can manifest in like being passive aggressive or sarcasm or rude jokes or indirectly expressing anger or whatever. But being in resentment is also causing you that stress and that tiredness, and it kind of all piles on top of each other. Now, the other couple of things that we see as a risk of being a people pleaser is relationship problems. So we all know that if we're not at our best, we're probably not interacting with the people around us as well or to the extent that we want to. We might feel like we've lost our identity. So people who think a lot about others run the risk of becoming a little less aware of what they want or how they feel. And it just might mean that they're less in touch with their needs or who they even are. A client that I had recently said she can't pick restaurants. She just can't. She doesn't know anymore what type of food she likes. She doesn't know where she wants to go out. She really has kind of lost that part of herself because she always lets her partner or her children pick the restaurant or pick where they're going first, right? It's a little bit that loss of identity. And the last risk is harm to others. And what I mean by that is people pleasing can cause a person to prioritize feeling liked over the well-being of others. So we see it at barns a lot when people start to engage in really, really harmful gossip just to fit in. And we get these little cliques and these kind of mean-spirited people in groups at our barns. And it's not that all of them are mean-spirited. Some of them are people-pleasing in order to fit in. So that's kind of the summary of what people-pleasing is, what the signs are that you might have it, and the risks that you pose to yourself by succumbing to people-pleasing. But before we go on to the actionable takeaway, I actually just want to break 2 myths for you. Number 1 is that people-pleasing is either good or bad, black or white. And number 2 is that being kind is people pleasing. So get ready. Number 1, people pleasing is not good or bad. People pleasing exists on a spectrum. And here's what I mean. We kind of think of it as black or white. So you either never get anything you want and never do anything for yourself, or you do everything for yourself, but people think you're a horrible person and you ruin all of your relationships, right? One or the other. And that's kind of what I hear from my clients, and they're really worried about swinging from one end of the spectrum to the other. But that just isn't true. There are so many options out there to set you up so that you're somewhere in the middle of the spectrum there, where you're comfortable. Options like maybe you set rules or boundaries for different situations. Like if your friend's going away and they want you to look after their horses, maybe you don't look after them in winter just because you do not have enough daylight hours to maintain all of your other commitments as well. But if your friend goes away over summer, maybe you'd be happy to look after them. Or maybe you become aware that you're a people pleaser around certain individuals, so you focus on strategies to help you in just those situations with that person, and you can operate like normal with everyone else. Or maybe you can work out some wording to let people down kindly and not ruin your relationships with them, kind of like what Ben was talking about in our other episode. So yes, people pleasing exists on a spectrum. It's not good or bad, it's not black and white, and it's all about your individual circumstances and how you are choosing to live your life. And myth number 2, come back to me if you're multitasking just for a second, because this is a really key point about people pleasing that I need you to hear, and it's something that I see people mix up all the time. You can be kind and not be a people pleaser. Yep, you can be kind and not be a people pleaser. People pleasing is super different from kindness, generosity, altruism, all of it. People can make balanced and intentional choices to do favors for others or to do something kind for others. You can literally say yes to something because you are so happy to do it, you want to do it, it won't add any extra stress, anything like that. The difference is, if you have a people-pleasing tendency, you will find it hard to say no, you may agree to things you don't want to do or you're not able to do, and it'll be at your own expense. So do you remember that definition that we started with? If you're being kind, but you're happy to do it, then it's just kindness. People-pleasing is when you have a strong urge to please others, even at your own expense. That's it. So your actionable takeaways today. I've just got a few small tips to help you start working out of that people-pleasing habit. What I find is that lots of people will offer you big hand-wavy advice like, just go and do what you want, or live your best life. And you'll note, even when I was telling you about my Antarctica submission, I didn't say, just go and live your best life. I said, how about we just live in this moment? Let's just get through this next 5 minutes, this next hour, or this next task. Let's refocus to the present. And in doing that, I'm going to go and live my best life in Antarctica, right? Because go and do what you want, live your best life, it doesn't work. Because loads of you are people pleasers and you do genuinely want to be nice to others, and that's great, and you want to maintain those relationships, and you don't want to just do what you want at the expense of others, right? So the dilemma is that you want to make others happy and you want to make yourself happy. And then you end up in this situation whereby if you do what you want, you'll feel really guilty, and if you do what others want, you'll feel resentment. If you do what you want, you'll feel guilty, and if you do what others want, you'll feel resentment. And it's a lose-lose situation or a lose-lose proposition for you. So you just need really small steps to start with. This is a long habit, an ingrained habit, and small steps is the only way. So tip number 1, or small step number 1, is to stall. So if someone makes a request from you, try allowing some time to think about it rather than answering immediately. And I'm not saying sit there in silence and stare at them while they're looking at you. I'm saying, what about we say something like, let me get back to you? Or, hey, I don't have my calendar with me right now, but let me check when I get home. Or, let me check with my partner. I don't know if we have plans that weekend already, or whatever. Or another good one is, could you send me some more information on XYZ, whatever they're asking you about? In a horsey context, we see lots of horse professionals doing this quite regularly. So you'll have lots of interactions with horse professionals where they'll say, hey, I don't have my calendar with me right now, but let me check when I get home. And often it's because they might have other events, they might have competitions, things they don't want to clash with, so they can pick and offer you a few times around their schedules that work for them, right? They've stalled. And that's a thing that they can do without having to commit on the spot to you at the time that you wanted. They can stall and get back to you later. And that's something you can try as well. The second small tip is that you need to start setting limits. And what I mean is that when you say yes to something, and you inevitably will say yes to something, include a time limit or a deadline or something like that, rather than waiting for someone else to set the schedule or set the boundaries. So let's go back to that "can you look after my horse for the next month" example. Maybe you say to your friend, "Hey, I'm available to look after your horses from the 1st to the 10th of November, and that's it." And they have to go find someone else after the 10th, but at least you've helped a little bit. Or you could say something like, "Hey, I'm happy to do the morning shifts, but not the evening shifts." It's like a form of compromise. Maybe the morning shift works better for you because you're there anyway doing your horses and you can slot them in. But the evening shift is really hard because you've got children, you've got to get them home from work, do the homework, cook dinner, everything. So it's kind of like a little form of compromise. You don't entirely have to say no, and you don't entirely have to wear that discomfort or the panic for saying no. But you don't have to commit to doing every single thing they wanted and wearing yourself out. So try and set a limit. Tip number 3 is to time block. So I love project management. I'm a project manager at the moment in my career, and I use this all the time. So I block out time in my calendar, and it's basically off limits time. Nobody can book in any new requests, any meetings, any phone calls, anything like that in my off limits time. And you can literally do this in your life, not just at work. So you can do it on your planner or in your calendar app or whatever, or just mentally know that, let's say, from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. every day is time blocked, off limits. You can't do anything for anyone else because you're going to ride your horses, or you're going to sit on the couch and read a book and refresh yourself. Or you can do it for entire days. So I actually heard Karen Rolfe, Dressage Naturally. She talked about having a non-horsey day, 1 day a week, that she spends with her family and friends. You could block out every Sunday, and maybe you say to your friends who are going away and they ask you to feed their horses, "Hey, I'd be happy to do the week shifts, but I can't do Sundays." And that's another compromise. I've time blocked Sundays. I cannot have anything fall into the Sunday. That time is set aside, and you need to treat it like a meeting with yourself. You need to respect it to that level, and even just an hour here or there can be so powerful. Because often, people pleasers aren't getting time to relax or refresh or for themselves. So this is a really important one. The fourth tip is you can rehearse saying no. So this is a really obvious one, it sounds like, and we did speak about this in Ben's episode and in the last episode where we were talking about mindset work ahead of time. But in this case, I just want to build on it slightly, and I just want to give you a small tip that there may actually be loads of situations where you can practice saying no and practice saying it in a tactful and empathetic way and rehearse it before you have to go into the really important situation, right? So situations like, let's say you've got a parent on a video call and they're calling way too often, way too long, and you're missing out on riding. I have literally seen people standing in the arena with their horse tacked up. They have sat on the mounting block and had to finish a FaceTime with their parents and then walk out of the arena and untack and go to work. That is the perfect time to practice saying no. "Hey, Mum, I really love you. I'm really grateful for the call. I'm actually just standing in the arena with the horse. Can I please call you back later tonight?" Or how about like when you're at a restaurant and the waitress comes over and asks you if you want to order a drink with your meal? No, thanks. It's such a cool opportunity to practice saying no. How about like door-to-door salespeople? I get very few of those now that I live out on a farm. The driveway is very long, but loads of you live in town and your horses are at an agistment centre somewhere or at a barn. If a door-to-door salesman comes to your door, that's the perfect time to practice an empathetic and a tactful no. Just really any of these situations where you care less than if it was your family, your friend, or your horse-related relationships or whatever, and they're standing in front of you asking you a really important thing, practice saying the no beforehand in smaller situations. And then the fifth tip is we just need to think about your language ahead of time. And I'm actually going to do a full episode on this at some point because it's so important. But the one example I want to give to you is When someone's standing in front of you and you as a people pleaser think that you cannot say no, Ben talked about it in his episode where he said that you end up giving like this 50-page submission, the longest excuse in the world, because you feel like you have to give them all of the information, all of the excuses, and back it all up, right? But it's also all about the language that we use. So if I said to you, I can't look after them on the weekend, then all of a sudden you asking me, all of a sudden you have a door that opens, right? So I've said, I can't. You're going to ask me, why can't you? Why not? And see if you can convince me, right? Whereas if I said to you, I don't want to look after them on the weekend, it's a lot more powerful. It opens way fewer doors to questioning. And yes, it's going to be more difficult. So it's another one that you have to practice. And this is another one that you have to think about. But your language is so important in order to avoid an even more uncomfortable or difficult situation down the track. Okay, those are your 5 tips. So you can stall, you can set limits, time block, rehearse the no, and think about your language. And I want you to bear in mind that you might actually require deeper assistance to make progress with this, because people pleasing becomes such an ingrained habit over time. And this could include help to do things like identifying the behavior, recognizing its impact, acknowledging or establishing exactly how much this has impact on your life. Maybe we need to identify which scenarios you're people pleasing in, or for which people. Maybe we need to keep track of how much energy you're expending and why. You need to feel empowered to change things. You need to learn about your values and who you want to give your time to. Maybe you need to learn about healthy boundaries and rules, or set some or establish some. Maybe you need to think about rewriting your story about circumstances or events. Anything like that. If you'd like to take this work further, or for example, you're trying the time blocking and you're not able to follow through when someone wants to book something in that time slot, then it's time to go to my calendar and sign up for my discovery calls. These are basically like your first session, a meet and greet, a chance for us to chat about how you're going, your mindset, your goals, and how we can help you moving forward. So you can book directly into the calendar, the links are in the show notes, or flick me a message and I'll send you the link. Now, we all know that our mindset impacts our horse training. Our horses pick up on our emotions and our feelings so easily. My goal with this podcast is to use this type of mindset and management work to balance your life inside and outside of the arena so that you can be more effective in your horse's training or rehabilitation. And with that, I just want to say thank you for tuning in today. If you like what you're hearing and you think others might benefit from a mindset podcast for equestrians, I have a huge favor to ask. It would mean so much to me if you would just take a few minutes to rate and review the podcast. Reviews are particularly important in helping a podcast be discoverable to other people. Or if you could just pick up the link to this episode today and flick it to a friend that you think it might be useful for. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you so much for listening. My goal is to help you more effectively train or rehabilitate your horse by focusing on your mindset and management, both inside and outside of the arena. If this sounds like something you'd like one-on-one help with, or if you'd like to follow along for more, come join us on the Equestrian Mindset Academy Facebook or Instagram. The links will be in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone.